how will Iron Harvest differentiate itself from Company of Heroes in other ways than a theme?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the gameplay that Company of Heroes is one of the big inspirations we had for the game. We basically took a look at all the big RTS out there and talked about things we feel that certain RTS do exceptionally well. There might be it might be controls or it might be gameplay or maybe we thought that especially Company of Heroes 1 did a lot of stuff right because it still to this day feels very how do you say it feels good to play the game even for people who are not really into RTS or who are not RTS experts. And so when it comes to gameplay, we there are we are pretty close to Company of Heroes, at least at the moment. I think we will liberate us a little bit from that later on because with the heroes and with the abilities of the mechs and stuff like that that Company of Heroes didn't have, obviously. But when it comes to things like story and story structure and so on, we're pretty different. When it comes to, for example, the campaigns, the biggest influence was Warcraft 3. So we have this one big story, this overarching story, and three individual campaigns where you basically each campaign has new hero characters and you see the story and the world from the different perspectives if you like, but everything obviously is intertwined and has to do with each other. So yeah, I would say the biggest differentiator are really the world and the story and the heroes and stuff like that. When it comes to gameplay, it is pretty close to Company of Heroes.
Okay, very cool. So Armor Donio is asking, in which part of the world will most campaign mission play out? Polania, Rusviet, or Saxony?
Well, as I said, there are three campaigns in the game. The first one is the Polania campaign, then the Rusviet campaign, and then the Saxony campaign. They there is the story is an overarching story, so it takes place most of the time in Eastern Europe. So I would say today's Poland and the Baltic states, but there's also parts of the game take place in Russia, and parts of the game take place in Germany.
Um, Acta non verba is asking, how in depth will the base building mechanics be, if there are any?
Yeah, there are. You can um, again, it's pretty similar to Company of Heroes in that aspect. So we don't have units that collect resources, but you capture points to earn resources over time. So basically, you can capture an oil rig, for example, or oil pumps to earn oil over time, and oil and or iron and oil are the two main resources in the game. And you can build um, buildings like HQs, barracks, workshops, and so on in most of the missions in the campaign. And you can also build stuff like bunkers and fortifications and barbed wire fences and stuff like that. So it's not a huge part of the game. We always say something like it's not the typical 50-50 or so. It's more like 80% is frontline battle basically, 20% is maybe research and building stuff and so on in the base.
Nice. Acta, non-verbal. Okay, we already asked his. So Nero want to ask you a question on the live chat. Nero?
So from where did come your main idea for the games? From the game for the game. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the world, the whole game is based on the world of 1920 plus, created by Polish artist Jakub Różalski, who did a series of artworks who basically combine classic 1920s or early 20th century landscape and people working on the fields and so on. Combine this with mechs and fantasy or alternate reality technology basically. And we saw the artworks like 4 years ago or so for the first time. And I just thought, well, this is really cool. This looks epic, but nothing more. There was no plan to make a game or something like that. It was just something cool I saw at the internet, in the internet. And then I would say like 2 years or maybe 2.5 years ago, we started to talk about the idea of making an real-time strategy game. And we thought about, okay, what could be an interesting setting? Do we do science fiction? Do we do fantasy or a real life scenario? And I remembered these artworks, and that I really felt this is something special, something really cool. So I contacted Jakub, and he was very interested in working with us. And so the whole idea of the world and the vibe when it comes to the world, and also most of the characters and most of the mechs we have up to this point is basically all Jakub's. He came up with that over a couple of years. When it comes to gameplay, as I said, Company of Heroes probably the biggest influence on that front. When it comes to story and how to structure the game and stuff like that, it's Warcraft 3. But there are elements from many different games. We basically you know if there is if we start working on anything new, for example, we are going to start working on the multiplayer part more in the next weeks. The first thing we do is basically check out everything we can lay our hands on and test it and try it and you know try to figure out what works, if it works, and what's cool about it. And is it still working today? Because many times you have an image in your head from a game that you played like 10 years ago or so, and you thought, oh, this was so awesome, this was so epic, and then you play it again today, and it feels weird, and it's not aged very well. And so what we do is, we go back, look at everything that's there, and then we try to figure out, okay, what are the elements that work best, and what are the elements that might work with Iron Harvest, and then we take it from there. So it's really, we look at many games.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Still, yeah. Stilgar is asking, what is the attitude towards esport and competitive play? Are they prepared to make trade-off in the multiplayer part in favor of competitive play? Will mirror matches be allowed?
Well, we always say that, you know, we don't think that you can really plan for esports in a sense that there are many big companies with a lot of money and a lot of marketing power who try to get into esports, and most of them fail. And I think it would be unwise to make the game really with esports in the back of your head. What we do is we want to make a multiplayer component that's fun and that works well and that has the potential or the structure that it's possible to make it a esport title. But we feel it's not really our decision if it's an esport game or not. It's basically the decision of the esports players. So all we do is we basically provide, the multiplayer component that it's theoretically capable of being a multiplayer and an esport title, but nothing more than that. And when it comes to focus, we did a survey among RTS players with, and I think like 15,000 or so players answered, and we basically asked them what is the most important aspect of an RTS for you. And it turns out that more or less 2/3 of the players say actually it's single player, it's skirmish, and it's maybe co-op, so stuff like that. That's more important for me than competitive multiplayer. And it's about 1/3 of the people said, okay, competitive multiplayer is very important for me. So that's a big chunk. 1/3 is obviously yeah, a very big chunk, but still we say, okay, the main focus for us at the after the release of the game is going to be the single player, the skirmish, the challenge map, stuff like that. And we want to do a very good multiplayer that we can expand on if it's successful. Basically, if people want to play the game and if enough people play it, then we are going to expand the multiplayer and add stuff. And if esport is the final the goal in the end, okay, fine, but it's not something we're planning with now.
Nice. Well, I have a question. Um, think are the main reason for the Kickstarter success?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. A big one is that it's already our 4th Kickstarter, and we delivered the first 3 games. So I think there is a baseline of trust, so to speak, that we're actually capable of developing games and delivering Kickstarter projects. So I would say that a good chunk of the people who backed Iron Harvest were backers of our previous games. And then another big factor, I think, is that we announced the game pretty early on, over a year ago, I would say, or maybe a year ago. And we built this community, especially on Facebook, slowly but steadily, basically. We had something like 100,000 fans on Facebook before we started the Kickstarter campaign. So it was not like, we had, or there were quite a few people who were already sold on the idea, basically, because they saw that we are, posting updates constantly and that we're working on the game, and the game gets better and better. And so it was not like a cold acquisition, but it was more like, okay, here's the Kickstarter, and if you're interested in the game, you can support us now. And I think a lot of people were basically waiting for that.
Amazing. Wow. Everyone go to their Kickstarter and check it out if you didn't do that yet. Okay. Move to the next question. Gursky or Gorsky is asking, huge mechs and cavalry teasered engine ones, are they only cinematic things or they will be implemented into the game? If so, are they single player things only? The big mechs and cavalry.
I'm not sure what he means with cinematic things.
Meant like the
I like in the trailer. Okay, I see.
yeah.
No, all the mechs in the trailer are in the game as well, and cavalry is in the game too. So hopefully it will look something like this in the game. Obviously, now for the trailer, it's especially spectacular, and probably won't the animations won't look that good in game, but the idea is that yes, indeed, the mechs can fight melee combat or can fight against each other, and there are how you call like synchronized animations, basically, or synchronized death animations and stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to cavalry, the idea is that one of our heroes, there are 9 heroes in the game, and one of the 3 Polonia heroes is basically the cavalry, if you like. So it's a cavalry commander who has the ability to basically group cavalry units around him. So he's, if you like, he's a squad that can grew bigger and bigger. So it might be, there might be the cavalry commander, the hero, with let's say 20 cavalry units around him. So he gets stronger the more, horses and the more people he um, can acquire, basically.
Dark Z's. Oh, we have a lot question, by the way. This is nice. So Dark Z's is asking, you have estimated development costs of more than 5.2 million. You said your company invested about 1 million and just raised one from the Kickstarter campaign. Where will the other money come from, and which publisher do you have in prospects?
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. The idea of the Kickstarter was not to fund the whole game, which is unrealistic with a game that big, but the idea was to stay independent as long as possible, because if well, not if when we negotiate with the publisher, it's very different if you go to the into the negotiations and the publisher has to pay 70 or 80% of the development, or if you go into the negotiations and basically say, what, we paid, let's say, 50% of the development costs, and the game is well on its way. The risk is very low. So this is a really good deal for you, but now we want to keep, for example, creative control, and we want certain things to be in the game because we already promised them, or we don't want to want certain things to be in the game. So, for example, we could say something like, okay, we do the deal with you guys, but we don't want to have microtransactions, for example, and stuff like that is only possible when you have enough leverage on your side, basically, and that's what the Kickstarter is for. And we talked to many publishers already, and there is very big interest in the game. So it probably is more like, the situation is more like we can choose between different publishers. And I think I don't want to name a few now because I'm not sure if they will like it, but it's publishers you would probably expect to publish a game in this size and in this genre, maybe.
Nice. No, before Red Prince, Toast and Eggs asked, question: how are you looking to balance the factions? Will they have similar mechanics and units, or will you try and find a balance between unique factions with their own strengths and mechanics?
Yeah, so as I said, each unit has its own hero units, and each unit has its own mechs. So they are totally different from one another. Obviously, there are some similarities because there's certain roles you want to have. Like for example, you want to have something like an artillery, for example. So each faction will probably have a mech that is able to shoot over a very long distance, but it's not the same mech and it's not necessarily the same mechanic, but the same role for the mech, basically. Um, and each faction has infantry units. And when it comes to infantry, they are somewhat similar, or let's say the basic infantry is different from faction to faction, but infantry can collect weapons and equipment on the battlefield, which basically transforms the infantry into almost a new unit, if you like. So, for example, if you find certain tools, your infantry unit becomes an engineer unit or a medic or a flamethrower unit or whatever. And these units are basically the same for all factions. So if you collect, a flamethrower with a Polonia unit, it's going to be a flamethrower unit, and if you collect the same flamethrower with um, a Saxony unit, it's still going to be a flamethrower. So on that level, they are pretty similar, but when it comes to mechs and to heroes, they're very different. And yeah, when it comes to balancing, we basically have to see how it actually turns out. There are, of course, plans how to do it, but in reality, balancing is really tough, and you really have to do it while you're playing the game and gathering data and gathering feedback, because it's just too complex to do it, on a piece of paper. You can basically not do it.
Okay. Um, the next question by Red Prince got a lot of likes and votes in the chat. He asked questions. Will there be weather impact on environment, or day-night cycle, or terrain elevation, or deterioration impact? And will it impact unit mobility, etc.?
Yeah, we are not really sure about this one yet. There is weather, and there can be day and night. That's not a problem from a technology standpoint, but we are not sure if we want to really make it gameplay relevant or not. So the idea is, sure, if we have, yeah, let's say, a mission that plays at night for the campaign, then yeah, everything is darker, and you probably couldn't see that far, and or not as far as usual. But we are not sure. For example, Company of Heroes 2 did these winter missions in snow and ice, and we are not the biggest fans of those, because it feels a little bit gamey, I would say. This whole, you have to go back to the fire to every like 30 seconds or something, or 60 seconds to not die. Feels a little bit weird, and you're super slow in the snow, and we're not sure if it really adds a lot of fun. If we find the fun in that, maybe we do it. As I said, it's not a problem from a technology standpoint, but we're not sure if we want to do it. When it comes to elevation and changes in the terrain, that's more of a technology problem for us, because we are using the Unity engine. There's not a really great way for us to change the terrain dynamically. What we have is, we have the destruction, or we have a destruction system in place. So there are buildings and there are walls and stuff like that are cover for units, and you can destroy them dynamically, but you probably cannot change the ground, basically, and make cover by, for example, getting into cover in craters or something like that. It's probably not going to work.
Um, Armor Donio is asking, question: will the story have an open ending or closed one? If new campaigns with perhaps new factions will be added in the form of DLCs, will this tie into the story or be its own thing?
So the idea is basically, without giving too much away, that the story of the three Iron Harvest campaigns are more or less, I would say, origin stories. So basically, you get to know the heroes and the factions, and the villains, and what everybody wants. And in the end, not everything is solved. So basically, in the end, everything is, the villains. Yeah, I can't really tell that, because what would be spoilery, but in the end, there are still a lot of things to do, and indeed, we would like to do DLCs with new factions and new campaigns. So the idea would be to basically, do a DLC with a new faction, with new heroes, with a new campaign that ties into, the story we set up in the main game, basically. Um, Obviously, that depends on whether the main game will be successful or not. But if you know the world of 1920 plus, there are a lot of cool factions, and so it would be awesome to explore that more.
Muli FTW is asking, what are your opinions on comeback mechanics? I know a lot of players who think this is their biggest issue with the Company of Heroes and Dawn of War games.
Yeah, we the second to last update we did on the Kickstarter, we talked a little bit about that. I think it's a good thing because what you really want to avoid is that at least in multiplayer, obviously, and that somebody does a mistake early on, and he basically is on a how do you say, it's downhill from there, and he doesn't really has a chance to come back or to do anything about it other than make it last as long as possible until he loses. So we think it's important to have mechanics in place to enable people to come back. But obviously, it still has to feel good. I mean, obviously, it can't be the other way around. That if you make mistakes, you get so much rubber banding and stuff like that you are more likely to win the match. That's obviously not a good idea either. But we think there has to be something in the game that takes care of this problem, that you don't want all your matches be decided within the first 5 minutes or so.
Nice. Actanon Verba is asking, what can we expect from competitive multiplayer? Will it be 1 versus 1 experiences or as large as 4 versus 4? Will bot skirmishes be available?
So we're not sure yet about what types or what multiplayer modes we want to provide. When you look at the numbers for most RTS, it's usually the bigger the matches get, the less players really play it. So I'm not sure we would do a 4v4. So what we agreed upon until now is basically to have matches with up to 4 players in any configuration. It might be 6 in the end, it might be 8 in the end. It really depends on the feedback we get for the multiplayer. Yeah, as I said, it would be maybe not energy. It might be not a good idea to put too much energy into really big scale multiplayer matches when in the end only like 1% or so of the players play these big matches. So we really have to look into that. Oh, and when it comes to skirmishes, the second part of the question, yes, there will be bot skirmishes.
Nice. Okay, yeah, I can personally say that I really like the large scale multiplayer matches. So yeah. Also, someone asked, what about the mirror matches? Like,
yeah, there will be.
Okay, awesome. Let's see our next question. Yeah, there was a discussion about the mirror matches there, and then someone, Cheese Master, asked, what about hero units like in Dawn of War?
Again? I see.
The first one.
Yeah, I think he's probably talking about Dawn of War 3.
No, the first one.
Okay, I see. Well, when it comes to heroes, our idea of heroes is not having super units. So it's not like this was because why I was expecting you talking about Dawn of War 3. We don't want hero units that are basically able to destroy whole armies or stuff like that. but hero units in our game are basically are not really better than normal units when it comes to most stats, but they have additional abilities. So they're basically more flexible for you to use in your in combat. So when we talk about hero units, what we have in mind is more the Warcraft 3 approach to basically have a unit with maybe four or so different skills you can level up. And these skills should enable you to, obviously, they're powerful. So it's not like they're really um, like every other unit, but the idea is that the skills give you, or the main reason why the skills are there is to give you more options, basically, and not to really decide, each battle or stuff like that. So yeah, this is the base idea.
Yeah, so they're gonna you'll be able to upgrade them, the hero units.
Yeah, you will be. There will be normal units and also mechs and infantry can be upgraded 2 times, basically to veteran status and elite status, and they gain, with each level up, they gain one new ability that's predetermined, and they also get new stats. When it comes to heroes, they can level up to 10 times, and you can spend basically your points. You can spend the points for different skills with each level up, and the hero level ups are also you keep them when you move from one level to another.
Cool. So Philotonic have a question about modding. Philotonic, are you here?
Yeah, so my question about modding is, do you have any plans to support modding? And given that you're using Unity, what level of support will modding be if you have it? Will it be more like City Skylines, which is very moddable, more like an RTS awful trading company, which is mostly moddable, or is it going to be like Deserts of Karak, which is built on Unity and not moddable at all?
Yeah, this is something we would really like to do, but we are a little hesitant to promise anything because it's going to be really tough um, to implement modding tools. So the official language at the moment is that there probably won't be any modding tools up until the release of the game. We hope to be able to add at least a map editor after that, and everything on top of that is, we really can't say anything about that at the moment because we just don't know if it's going to be possible, or how much work we would have to invest into that. We like the idea, but it's pretty tough because Unity isn't the greatest engine to allow mods.
Um, Classic Metal is asking, how involved is Jacob Rosalski with the development? Who is that?
Yeah, he is in our internal Stride channel for the game. So we're basically, whenever somebody does anything, some artwork or design or 3D model or something like that, we post it in the channel. Jakob gives feedback, and he's also the guy who does most of the artworks when it comes to characters and I would say the general direction, so to speak. So he would, for example, design the basic units for all the factions or the basic infantry units, for example, and then we do the variations and stuff like that because he is a busy man, but yeah, he's pretty involved.
Reaper is asking, how much UI customization will be there? How much information about units will be shown, such as damage, armor, etc. A problem with Company of Heroes 2, there was a lot of hidden stats on units that needed third-party websites to know anything about.
Yeah. So the basic idea we have when it comes to UI and also controls to a certain degree is to let the player decide what they want to see and how they want to see it. So the standard settings will be somewhat limited because we don't want the UI to be cluttered, but there will be a lot of options to show additional information and stuff like that. And there would be also an opportunity, or you will be also able to basically set up the UI anyhow you want. So, for example, you can decide if you want your mini map on the lower left or on the lower right or on the top right or whatever. You can configure that any way you want. And you can also configure what kind of messages do you want to receive and what kind of information do you want to see on the screen and so on. So we haven't done that yet. So at the moment, there are hidden information in the game as well. But the idea is to expose as much as possible as long as people are interested in seeing that stuff.
Nice. Is asking, will there be Navy or Air Forces in the game?
No, not for the main game. Probably, or maybe with one of the add-ons would be a nice feature to have in an add-on now with ships or whatever. But probably not in the main game. There might be something like special general powers or something like that you can order an airstrike maybe. And there is at least in the campaign there is, for example, a Zeppelin plays a role, but it's not like you really control the units or any units that are not ground units, basically.
Cool. Will there be, Toast and Eggs is asking, will there be regional servers? I understand you are a European company, so I feel I should ask about this as a Canadian.
I didn't see the question. Where is it?
Will there be regional servers?
Okay, I see. I'm not sure. Let's say from a technology standpoint, yes. So there will be multiple servers to minimize lag and so on. But we're not sure if there will be gameplay-wise or community-wise different servers or not. Probably not. So probably there will be one league or one ladder and so on, but multiple hardware servers, if you like.
Nice. Mr. Pringles is asking, will we have rebindable hotkeys?
Yeah, absolutely. This is again, this comes back to the phenomenon that nobody can agree on anything when it comes to UI and controls and hotkeys and stuff like that. And since we can't even agree here in the company what is right and what is wrong, we said, okay, fuck it, we are not going to determine stuff like that, but we suggest something, but then you can, all the players can do it however they want.
Nice. Manon Mars is asking, will all units have the ability to go melee? Like close attack?
Again?
Units have the ability to go melee. This is how you pronounce it? Melee attack?
Yeah, okay. Melee combat, yeah. Yeah, not all the units, but quite a few of them. So, for example, infantry units might have a bayonet on their rifles, and so they can, fight close combat. And some of the mechs will also have the ability to for example, do a charge attack. In the first trailer we released, there is a scene where one of the mechs basically charges towards another mech and stabs it with its bayonet, and so this is basically the idea. It's a special ability for some of the mechs.
Back is asking, what can we expect to see more from the Unity engine? Is that what we see for now, the end graphics?
No, in general, we're pretty early, so it's all pre-alpha stuff. So I would say when it comes to graphic fidelity and stuff like that, in about a year from now, we will, more or less be set, and there won't be big changes anymore, because up to after that point we will focus on performance and stability and stuff like that when it comes to visuals. Um, Until that point, so for about the next year or so, we are working on multiple fronts to enhance the graphics and the presentation. So, for example, at the moment, we are looking into a different foliage system, so a different solution to render, grass and bushes and trees and so on, that allows us to have a more dynamic foliage. So, for example, that when mechs move through the grass, that basically the grass stays on the ground, because they trampled all over the grass, and then the grass is flat on the ground and stuff like that, which might look nice. And so we're basically in the middle of figuring that stuff out, and see what we can do.
Nice. So before I ask this question, I will tell you that one of the updates on the Kickstarter, they had an April Fool joke. They showed everyone that they're going to do a reskin of the mechs in a. Am I right? So he's asking, will there be any customization of units in multiplayer, like skins, referring to your April Fool's joke?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we did this April Fool joke that we want to, rework the look and feel of the game to match a more international taste, or a more Blizzard-like style. And so we reskinned one of our mechs into this pink plastic look, and yeah, some people seem to like it. Yeah, we are thinking about. I mean, there will be, in some capacity, there will be skins in any case, because we want skins to be rewards maybe for multiplayer. And also there is one reward for the Kickstarter campaign that is a skin. So there will be some solution in any case. But the big question is, how far do we take it? Do we allow people to really design their mechs, or to really, paint them? Or is it more like, okay, this mech has like two or three different styles or something like that? So we are not sure about that. It would be cool to have something like a painter mode or something like that, but it's a nice to have, and we don't want to overpromise when it comes to stuff like that, because the main focus for us is to make the game and to make the core game great. And as soon as we have that, then we can talk about the nice to haves.
Awesome. So before we continue, I want to ask you, how much time left do you have? Because we haven't talked about it before. So,
well, I don't care, as long as it takes.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go on. Also getting questions in the private chat. People are sending me there. I don't know why. So I will go there in a second. But first, let's get back to the question. Where were we? 1 second, I got lost. See, we are now at Acta non-verbal. Thank you very much. Will there be out of mission permanent faction upgrades, and will unit hero progression abilities carry from mission to mission?
A couple of weeks ago, the answer would have been no. Only hero units take their experience and their skills with them into the next mission. Since then, we were thinking about that a little bit because it wouldn't be that hard to basically allow the players to take a core army with them. So the idea would be that units that survive one mission can replace starting units basically in the next mission, and it wouldn't be that hard to do. And we like the idea because one of the big gameplay decisions we made early on is we want players to care about the units. So we want, we don't want players to build, masses of units and throw them into battle and don't care for them. But we want players to, really think about their tactics and think about how to utilize each unit the best way possible. And when this is one of the goals, it might be a good idea to, enable players to keep units over multiple missions, maybe even name the units and stuff like that, because then you might have a bigger emotional connection to the unit. So this is something we are thinking about at the moment, and I would guess that chances are not bad that we are actually going to implement that you can keep some of your units.
Awesome. He is asking how the off-map support works, like in Company of Heroes, or more like Command and Conquer Generals, or even different off-map support.
Again?
Map support. That's the term Gursky wrote. If you want, you can also explain it now if he's listening. I'll repeat the question. How the off-map support works.
I'm not sure what you mean with off-map support.
Okay, so yeah, Gorsky, yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah,
right.
this is what I meant when I talked about, for example, airstrikes or something like that. We are not sure if we want that or if it's in the game or not. It's just something we haven't decided on yet. If there are something like general abilities or however you want to call it, there might be something like off-map artillery or an airstrike or whatever. But we are not 100% sure we want that because it can be fun on one hand, but on the other hand, it's always a little bit, you can't really do anything about it when you're on the receiving end, and it feels, I don't know, it sometimes feels a little bit weird for me because it's not really I can do anything about it. It's not really, a huge tactical thing you do, but it's more like, okay, now I'm using my super ability. Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure about that one.
Okay. Have someone wrote the question in Korean, so I can't ask it. Sorry. Romy, if you're listening, please try to write it in English. Oh, next question. Dark Seas is asking, will there be unique takedowns like sometimes a mech rips off the arm of another one?
Yeah, this is the synchronized kills or the synchronized animations I was talking about. So when it's basically a finisher or something like that, there probably will be something like that in melee combat. Again, this is something we haven't implemented yet, so I don't want to overpromise, but it's something we have on our list that would be cool. That if it's clear that your attack kills the enemy mech, then there will be basically a little cool animation that takes it as long as the normal attack would have been, but it's cooler and it looks cooler. So yeah, that's the idea.
Okay. So I have one question in private. Someone asked me. I think we already talked about it, but not sure if you got to this detail. Is asking if there will be melee heroes and if those melee heroes have higher stats than ordinary soldiers, and is also asking if the ordinary soldiers can change from range to melee.
Yeah, so the normal infantry units basically change from range to melee automatically. So it's basically a question of distance. So if the enemies are very close, the units switch to melee attacks. So, for example, if you go into a trench, and there is an enemy squad in the trench, they won't they will not shoot at each other in close distance, but they would start to fight. And when it comes to mechs, what was the question there? About melee?
If you can change the soldiers to be from range to melee, like if you can control that.
Yeah, no, this was what I answered, but the first part of the question.
You also ask. Oh, sorry. Right. You also ask if the heroes, there will be like melee heroes that have higher stats and ordinary,
Yeah, I
more
see.
than the ordinary soldiers.
Yeah, I see. There are heroes with melee capabilities, but there is, let me think, no, there is not really a melee hero that's only useful in melee attacks. The idea is, no, not really. I mean, yeah, as I said, there are heroes that have melee attacks or melee skills, and obviously you can level these skills up, and then your hero might even be more efficient in close combat than it is in range combat. But usually, all the heroes have some range capabilities and are more ranged units than melee units. There are maybe one of the mechs is the regular mechs is probably you might call a melee unit, but usually it's more about shooting than hitting.
Holy.
Nice, very cool. So Skynet had a question you want to ask in voice.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about the leagues in the multiplayer. So, will there be different leagues like in StarCraft 2, like from bronze to masters to grandmasters, and like a league for like the top players? And my second question is, how does the ladder system works? Because like I think a big problem for like new people is when like a guy that bought a game yesterday is starting to play the game and the first opponent he gets is like a guy that is really good. Like it's really frustrating for the new guy. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more details are in the last two updates because this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the handicap system where we are going to implement for multiplayer, which goal is exactly that, to find a way to um, match better players with not so good players and um, to try to do something that both players have fun. This is a pretty big issue, so maybe the last two updates on Kickstarter elaborate on that a little bit more. In general, one of our big concerns is to not split the multiplayer community or the player pool too much because we are not StarCraft. There won't be millions of players online all the time, and so we have to to find ways how to keep the waiting times low, or to basically how to match players fast enough, so it doesn't feel like you're waiting for half an hour to play half an hour. um, and so there probably will be leaks, but we're not sure how strong the how do you say, how strong the leagues are divided, basically. So probably there will be options, and not only options but also good reasons to play with people in other leagues, because you can earn points even if you play against somebody in a lower league, because then um, you might add um, basically some extra goals and some extra bets, basically, to your match. So it becomes more difficult for you as the better player, but you still can earn points. So this is the rough idea. But as I said, maybe have a look at the last two updates. This we explained this much more eloquently there.
Okay, thank you.
Nice. Per is asking, since some units have melee, will it be like Dawn of War when one unit engage the other in melee, both units are forced into melee? I think you already answered that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, and I think the specific question is if you're forced into melee, and no, you're not, as long as it's not clear that you die. So if the attack kills you, then there will be these kill animations, basically, but then you can't do anything anyway with the unit anymore. And as long as you don't want to engage in the close combat, you're not forced to. So you can try to run away, or you can try to distance yourself.
I'm back is asking, what if a hero dies in multiplayer match? Can you build it again? If yes, is there like veterancy back to 0?
When a hero dies, you can bring him or her back. They keep their abilities, because the abilities are well in multiplayer. Actually, I'm not sure about that. I was just about to say that the abilities stay with the character over multiple maps or missions, but this is for single player and for the campaigns. In multiplayer, we're actually not sure yet if heroes keep their skills, or if you have to re-earn the skills in each map, which probably is going to be the case, because it makes it more interesting, because then you have to decide in every match into what direction to take your hero, which is probably more fun. So I can't actually tell you at this point if you lose some of your abilities or not if you die. Probably not, because probably probably the amount of time it takes to get your hero back is probably bad enough for you.
Nice. So, ask, will the heroes have dramatic musical numbers? I'm not sure about what's the question.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, okay. Toast next, you can write it again if you want. Okay. In-game scene, we see that when a mech shots on a soldier, the parts of his body don't fly away. Will that change, and will there be blood?
Yeah, so at the moment, the soldiers have ragdoll physics when they're dead. So when one of the big mechs shoots at them, they're probably going to die immediately. and fly away and stuff like that, but they don't lose limbs, and they probably won't. What we are going to add is blood. So there are some little blood effects at the moment, but very subtle. So there will be more blood when they're getting hit, and there will be also blood on the ground to indicate that there had been a battle. So when you go, when you're on another part of the map and you go back, then you can see, okay, actually something went down here because here's a lot of blood and a lot of helmets and stuff laying around, even if there are no bodies anymore.
Nice. Romy is asking, do you have a plan to translate into Korean?
Yeah, very likely. At the moment, usually our games are being translated in something like 7 to 10 languages. And I would say this is probably going to be the case for Iron Harvest as well. So usually it's English, France, Spanish, Italian, German, Portuguese, Russian, Polish, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. So 10 or 11 languages. Um, so probably yes.
Nice. Armor Donio is asking, how will the pets of heroes work? Wow.
Yeah. So 3 of the heroes we announced all have pets. Actually, I think there are actually the only 3 heroes who have pets. Let me think. Yeah, maybe. So not all heroes have pets, but these 3 have, and they work similar to, if you remember in Warcraft 3, the dire wolves of Thrall. So something like that. It's basically an ability. So, for example, if you play Anna, the sniper hero of Polonia, she is a sniper who can hide and who's very good in killing enemies at a distance. And usually, the big downside of being a sniper is, as soon as somebody spotted you or is close to you, you have a problem because you can't fight in close range, or you're very weak when you're really under attack. And because she's a hero character, in her case, she has the special ability to call her bear, Wojtek, who is basically, a close combat unit. So when she called him, he automatically tries to defend her and tries to keep enemies away from her for a couple of seconds. I don't know, we don't have him yet, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, something like that, and then he has a cooldown. So it's basically a life insurance in this case, and after a couple of seconds he's gone, and you have to wait maybe 2 minutes or so until you can use him again. When it comes to the wolves of Gunther, another hero, the wolves are more independent, so you can basically spawn him or call them, and then you can control them for a little while, but not that long, to do, for example, a scouting job for Gunther. So his wolves are very stealthy, so they basically can try to sneak ahead and basically scout the areas ahead of Gunther, and they can also fight, but you can control them directly, while Wojtek is basically an AI unit you call for reinforcements.
Awesome. I'm not sure how to read this name. Monsieur Adni?
Oh yeah, that's me. I'm Monsieur Adne of the DR. Yeah,
Sir?
I'm a really big fan of
Thought
Iron
that you have a
Harvest. And
question?
yeah, I have a question. I wanted to ask Jan Tyson, what's your opinion on spliffing?
Maybe it's away in for a second. Okay, so we'll come back to it. Um,
Can you ask it again? It was really
Oh, I'm sorry.
said that
Yeah,
Monsieur Adni
I was
has a question, but he want to ask it on a voice.
Yeah, if that's
Press
possible.
now.
Is it possible? Can I ask it?
1 second. Okay. I will move to the Stilgar question. Question about in ladder competitive multiplayer, will there be any skills units which you have to unlock somehow?
Again, which question are we on?
Stilgar from 1114. No, that's my time. Sorry. So from Stilgar.
Like 1014, yeah. And ladder competitive multiplayer. Any skill units you have to unlock somehow. We're not sure yet. In multiplayer, the big question for us at the moment is, what is the long-term and mid-term motivation to keep playing, and it can be something like obviously going to a higher league and stuff like that, and it can be something like skins or cosmetics and stuff like that. But it could be also something like additional units or additional abilities. And we're not sure yet how to do it because on the one hand, earning a new unit, for example, is a very good reward. But on the other hand, it's problematic from a balancing standpoint and so on. So we are not sure about that yet.
Okay, so I think that we will cover all of the question. I'm not sure. Let's give everyone last opportunity for questions. Two silly ones that I skipped, yeah. So, yeah, do you want to ask?
Automatic what? Again? I see. Well, the idea is again that we want to give the players as much freedom as possible. So you can basically configure the matchmaking. You obviously can play against only friends if you want, or you can make a very specific match to play against one specific friend. So basically a private match, and you can also you know so the matchmaking is basically you can configure it any way you want, hopefully. So if you want auto matches and you don't care against who you play, then you can probably configure it this way. Maybe I don't understand what you mean with auto match. Yeah. Yeah, for me, that's it's basically one of the options in the matchmaking. So maybe we are not talking about the same thing, but okay, okay, sure. Yeah, okay, so yeah, I see. Sorry. Now I understand you. This is what I was talking about earlier. The last two updates we did on Kickstarter deal with the handicap system we are thinking about. So this would be probably better to read the two updates because they do a much better job than I could do here to talk about the handicap system. The short answer is yes. We want to implement something like a handicap system to again keep the player pool as big as possible. And so it should be, fun for a better player to play against the weaker player, and it should be fun for the weaker player to play against the better player. And we think the only way to do that is to implement some sort of handicap system. But again, nobody is forced to use it or to play with the handicap. If you don't want to do it, you can just play without it as well.
Cool. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
So
sure. You're welcome.
yeah, okay. So I see Dars Deng had a question, right?
Hello. Hello. I have a question. Are you guys planning on doing a developer-led tournament later on? Like how Company Heroes sometimes they have that ESL thing.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think the the next thing we're going to release is the Alpha 1 for backers this summer, so in end of July, early August. And we plan to release the Alpha 2 end of this year, and the Alpha 2 will feature multiplayer for the first time. So the idea is that basically from the moment we release the Alpha 2 until the game is released. Yeah. So the idea.
Monsieur, your mic.
Jan, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm still there. So the idea is that after Alpha 2, that we have basically 10 months or so until the release of the game, and the idea is to use that time to really figure out the multiplayer modes and the balancing the multiplayer and the matchmaking and all that stuff, and also obviously the technical side to try the servers and so on. And I think that one of the big things we can do is to really to do something like a tournament or to do something like a weekend of intense multiplayer activity. So basically, I think we would do something like that to invite players to play the game and to get feedback from them. And if we do it during the production, why not after release as well?
Sorry, when was Alpha 2 expected? I didn't quite catch that.
Alpha 2 end of this year.
All right, thank you.
So we had someone asking, Yaniv asked, how many programmers you got working on the game?
At the moment, we are, let's see, 5 programmers, I would say. It's about 12, 13 people working at the game at the moment in the office, and also a couple of guys external artists and composers and so on. So at the moment we are maybe 18 to maybe 20 guys, and we will ramp up the production over the next couple of months. So there will be about 28 to 30 people working on the game, and about half of them here in the company. And I think, if I remember correctly, it's something like 6 or 7 programmers in the project plan.
Cool. I'm back asked, how works the resources system? There is iron and oil, and is there also manpower like in Company of Heroes 2? Will more sectors give you more manpower?
Yeah, at the moment it's exactly that. So iron is the simple resource, and oil is the advanced resource, and there is manpower. We are not 100% sure if we keep it that way. This is something we have to try and to figure out. At the moment, the idea is that it's not, you don't earn manpower automatically with sectors, because there are not really sectors in our game, but we have different kinds of points or buildings you can conquer, basically. So we have, for example, oil pumps you can conquer to earn oil, and similar to that, there might be special points or buildings you can conquer to earn manpower, basically. And also manpower, or the manpower cap will rise when you level up your base or your HQ.
Awesome. I'm back. Asked, how long after release will you support the game with patch, etc.?
Hopefully for many years, because the game is a huge success, and we're doing add-on after add-on. But yeah, in reality, it really depends on how successful the game is. Our internal plan is basically, or if we talk to a publisher and talk about the whole deal, we will ask them to support the game for at least 9 months after release. So 3 months after release is really the hot phase with stuff going wrong, and additional stuff has to be, or like little adjustments have to be made and stuff like that. And then for half a year we would like to add free content and new maps and new gameplay modes and stuff like that. So 9 months is about the least amount of time we have in mind, and hopefully, as I said, it's just the beginning, because if possible, we would like to make multiple add-ons for the game, and then it could be years potentially.
What's this? Stilgar. Should I download the alpha if I want to give feedback on the multiplayer and technology, but don't want any spoilers before I can experience the full campaign experience? What will be in the single player alpha campaign or skirmish?
So the first alpha will not feature anything from the campaign. So basically, the first alpha will be challenge maps. So these are single player maps with special goals. So for example, the little demo we made for the Kickstarter is like a horde mode, basically. So there are waves of enemies spawning, and they try to conquer your HQ, and you have to try to survive 10 waves. So, and something like this there will be a variation of this map in the Alpha 1, and there will be also maybe 2 or so other single player challenge maps. This is more to basically show off the basic features of the game, and the controls and the UI and stuff like that. It's not really, I mean, the challenge maps will be in the final game as well, but the challenge maps are not the main focus of the final game. Then in the Alpha 2 there will be the multiplayer stuff, the first maps and so on. And then after that, in the beta 1 2019, there will be the first campaign maps. So you won't get spoiled you won't spoil the campaign in the Alpha 1 or 2.
Wow, that's cool, because it's always something that scares you. You don't want to experiment from the campaign if you are not gonna get all.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also I think from a developer standpoint, the campaigns are not that interesting to get feedback for, because the campaigns are, if you have all the systems in place and everything runs fine in the challenge maps and in the skirmish mode and in the multiplayer mode, the campaigns are not that complicated from a technology standpoint. They are much more complicated, obviously, when it comes to storytelling and cutscenes and stuff like that. But this is not something we need that much feedback for. So I think it makes sense to implement the campaign or to release the campaigns later than, for example, the multiplayer matches, which are much more interesting from a development standpoint because you can for example do all the balancing based on multiplayer feedback, and you can't really make balancing based on campaign feedback because in the campaigns you should always win, or you should be it's always really depends on the campaign map how many units are on the map, but usually you have a couple of units and there are far more enemy units, and you can't really balance anything in a campaign map, so campaigns are not that interesting from a technology standpoint.
Last Rights asked, how many multiplayer maps on release, how many challenge maps, and team challenge maps?
We don't know the final numbers yet. The idea is to have a couple of maps for each multiplayer mode, and since we don't know the modes yet, we don't really know how many multiplayer maps it will be. I don't think it will be like 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever maps. We are not really fans of, let's put it this way, I think it makes more sense to have fewer maps that are really, really great and everybody can, learn and learn to love basically, and then maybe add maps later on than to start with 10 maps in every mode. This doesn't really make sense for me. So I would say probably maybe something around 10 maps or so. If there are, I don't know, 3 or 4 modes, 10 or 12 maps, maybe something like that. Challenge maps, maybe a handful, maybe 4 or 5, something like that. And the last thing was what? Challenge map, the solitaire, or the co-op challenge maps. Again, challenge maps, maybe 4 or 5 single player, 4 or 5 co-op challenge maps.
Okay, very cool. So Red Prince asked, will there be cheat codes for Iron Harvest? Maybe a mech that shoots nukes.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about that. Would be okay. At the moment, there is a debug menu in the game for us as developers, so we can change stuff on the fly while we are playing the game. And one of the things you can do is when you are in this debug mode, you can press F1 to basically drop bombs and let things explode. And it's so much fun. So basically, everybody who tests the game at the end, they just destroy a couple of buildings by pressing F1 and see how they explode, and it's fun. And because everybody is doing it and everybody has fun with it, we were thinking about maybe really adding a cheat mode or something like that into the game. I remember, maybe some of you remember as well, Age of Mythology had this really crazy cheat mode where you basically could spawn enemies like some bear shooting lasers out of its eyes and some flying hippopotamus or something like that shooting little hearts and stuff like that. And I always remember that being really fun. So maybe there will be something like a crazy cheat mode. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, it's like what they have in a I forgot the name of this game now. Okay, so Last Rights also asked, are all the co-op challenge maps simply team version of the solo challenge maps?
Probably not. The co-op campaign maps it's basically the single player campaign, but you can play it with two players. So there are no special maps. But when it comes to challenge maps, I would say, again, we don't have them yet, so it's not a promise, but I would say there are probably a couple of maps that you can play a single player or in co-op, but there might be also a couple of maps that are especially designed for co-op.
Nice. Okay, this is a very specific question. Will the mechs do footprints in the ground? If yes, how long will they be visible?
Yeah, it's one of the things that's a little bit weird when you deal with mechs instead of tanks and vehicles. Usually, when you think about how can you make a map interesting or visually appealing, one of the things basically all RTS do is they show tracks, on the streets, and there are tracks from tanks and from jeeps and so on, but that wouldn't make any sense for our world. On the other hand, it might look weird if there are hundreds and hundreds of little footprints on the ground. Might seem weird as well. So we're not 100% sure about that. At the moment, I would say there will be probably footprints. I don't know how long they will stay. This is probably something that depends on the graphic settings. So when higher graphic settings, they might stay there forever. But I'm not 100% sure about that because it might look weird. We really have to try this out. But it's not. But it's something we are thinking about because it has also gameplay implications. Because if there are tracks, okay, there are tracks maybe even of a specific mech, and you can see, okay, this mech was here, and he moved from the right to the left. So he's probably somewhere in the woods over on the left side. So it has gameplay implications. So it's not purely visual. So it's something we have to think about hard.
Will ray tracing get in the game?
No.
By the way, but okay, the next question got a lot of votes. Let's see what's that. Last rights ask question of massive importance. Replays, will you have them on release? Many modern RTS release without replays, and it hurts the game quite badly. This is a necessary function for content creator to have.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be replays. This is something that comes very cheap with the technology we're using for multiplayer, because it's basically a byproduct of our multiplayer code. So there is absolutely no reason to not have replays.
Okay. Stilgar is asking, other games Unity 2, how do you feel about C# as a game dev language? Do you expect the new C# features to be useful for game development when they make it into Unity, specifically ref returns and ref locals? Wow, that's very deep.
Yeah, I'm not a programmer, so I know what you're talking about, but only on a high level. Yeah, on a high level and not that deep. Usually, or in general, Unity is fine for an RTS. It has its problems like every unit, like every engine. C# is a nice language to develop games with, because it's very comfortable, and the tools are powerful, and it's easy to read, and it's nice to work with. But of course, it's not as fast as C++, for example. And so the changes Unity is doing with 2018 1 and 2 are potentially very interesting for us, because some of the functions might get much faster, but also especially the multi-core stuff is very interesting for us because at the moment there is very little multi-core um, technology in the game because we are basically waiting for them to implement their new system. So we could, write our own code, our own multi-core code, but if they are working on that at the moment, then why not wait for them? So we see pretty big potential to get a performance boost in the second half of the year because of the new features.
Aromi is asking, how many types of walker units are there?
Yeah, the walkers are basically the mechs, and as I said, it's between 30 and 35.
Wow. Armor Donio is asking, how realistic will the speed of units be? Like the difference between the speed of a cavalry and an infantry unit?
I don't know about realistic. It's always about how does it feel and how does it play in the game. So basically, we're always saying we do not add something because it's realistic. We only add something if it improves the gameplay. And I would say something similar is true to when it comes to speeds and fire rates and fire ranges and stuff like that. It has to work for the game. So obviously, it would be weird if cavalry units are slower than infantry units. So they will be faster, but I can't say if it's a realistic difference between them or not. It has to feel right for the game, and we have to see. We have to figure that out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Armo Donio is also asking, how long will the average length of an animated cutscene be?
Hard to say. There will be 7 missions in each campaign, so 21 missions in total. And there will be 23 cutscenes because there are cutscenes at the end of a campaign and at the start of a new campaign. So 21 missions, but 23 cutscenes. And the average length might be something around 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30, something like that. So we are calculating with about 45 to 60 minutes of cutscenes.
That's almost a feature film.
Yeah,
Amazing.
that's quite a lot. But what we're doing is we use the well, when we design a unit or a character, for example, we design them in basically cutscene quality, and then for in-game there are a lower quality and an optimized version of the character basically. So and then we use these assets for the cutscenes, and the cutscenes are not rendered CGI movie cutscenes, but most of them are more like in-game cutscenes. So they look a little bit nicer than in-game graphics, but it's not like Diablo or something like that CGI extravaganza.
I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna limit this conversation for 50 minutes from now, if that's okay, because yeah, it's already almost 2 hours. So the next question from Gunrunner. Which of the current factions will have the overall biggest mech at this point?
Depends on whether you mean playable mech or mech overall. Mech overall is probably, or not probably, at the moment, it's for sure the tour mech from Polonia, which is, you see the foot of the mech at the very end of the Kickstarter trailer. So that's the biggest mech we have in the game at the moment, but he's not a playable unit that you can really move around or something like that. The biggest mech controllable at the moment is from Rasviet. And I'm not 100% sure if it will be the biggest one at the end, but it's up there.
Awesome, awesome. Okay. We had Terata that wanted to ask a few more questions, right?
Desiderata, yeah. I'm not sure, Elon, if you want to leave, I can take over regarding asking the questions. I'm not sure if the other people are fine with it.
No problem. I think that we're coming to a conclusion and everything is okay with everyone. So feel free.
Okay. One question from Armordonio. Will there be more surveys in the future? Jan? More surveys. Like reading, like asking questions toward the community regarding, for example, any big issue that you might be facing with the game.
Yeah, will there be more surveys?
Yeah, maybe. We're not 100% sure how to do it in the future. So there are multiple ways we are going to communicate with the backers, especially from the Kickstarter. There will be monthly updates, so pretty substantial updates, so bigger than the updates we're doing at the moment on Kickstarter, but more like, okay, this is really, this is what we're working on this moment, this month, and this is, stuff we are thinking about. And as always, there can be comments on the Kickstarter side, and there can be comments on Facebook and so on. We also have a Discord channel for backers where we are going to discuss stuff like that. And there might be additional surveys, probably, or if there are, then probably in connection with the Alpha 1 and the Alpha 2. So basically, if you played the Alpha 1, here's, a bunch of questions we have for you. Maybe you can answer them, something like that. I don't think that we are going to do another really fundamental survey, if you like, because, the further we are down the line in the production, the less, big fundamental shifts
it becomes
there will be,
considerably
but
harder
more like
and more
specific
expensive.
questions.
But yeah, regarding for example, I have been doing notes regarding all of the answers that you have been given. So if you want, I can go like point by point in order for you to clarify some of them. So in the first note that I have here, you said that you saw that 1/3 of your population that were interested in the game had interest in multiplayer. Meanwhile, the rest 2/3 had interest in regarding skirmish and adding multiplayer. For example, what can you say? For example, you know that there are several subgenres in RTS games. For example, you have the people that are more interested in like lower paced games. For example, be it Dawn of War compared to StarCraft. And inside of those slower paced games, you have also the 4X communities that used to be real time communities. So, what do you think is your niche regarding regarding the game that you are trying to develop now? Instead, for example, of appealing towards the fast-paced StarCraft player base, which do you think that you will try to appeal to them, or try to appeal, for example, to the slower-paced communities regarding gameplay?
Yeah. So in general, if any of you is interested in the results of the survey, we released the results completely on, I think it's on our website, kingart-games.com, and it's also on Facebook. So if you want to learn more about the answers and the percentages and stuff like that, you can check that out there. And when it comes to the niche, we see Iron Harvest in. We think, or the big point for us was that we had this feeling that many RTS rely too heavily on clicks per second and the action aspect of the game, and you know, these my unit blob fighting your unit blob, and it's not you know, really about tactics. And so one of the big things we have on the top of our list, basically, we want to achieve is to make the game slower and to give the people the chance to come up with a plan and execute this plan, and you know, have the time to you know, really come up with the best tactic for each situation. So I would say it's not an action focused RTS, and it's also not an economy or base building focused RTS, but it's more like a combat focused RTS, but much slower than other RTS out there. This is
Even
would
considerably
say
slower, for example, than Company of Heroes, which is your baseline regarding, for example, design.
yeah, I would say it's slower than Company of Heroes.
Okay, that's very interesting, because all of the gameplay that we have been seeing, for example, is that the game tends to be like more or less as around the same speed of Company of Heroes or Dawn of War 1 or even 2.
Yeah, I think it's not dramatically slower. So it's in the same category probably, but I think it's a little bit slower because you know, our mechs, I would say, are slower than most of the vehicles in Company of Heroes, and also the cover plays an even bigger role in our game. So you know, you can, you know, put your units into cover and you know, leave them alone for a couple of seconds without having to fear that they are dead when you are back. So I think it's a little bit slower than Company of Heroes or Dawn of War. And also one of the things we would like to do in the campaign, at least, is for most maps, we would like to focus the player attention a little bit more on, you know, on one front basically, and don't want to force the player to jump around that many hotspots all the time, which is something that I think helps again to give the player enough time to come up with a plan and to execute the plan.
Okay, so in that sense, we're not talking about, for example, at a deep unit level, at a micromanagement level. It is not your focus in order to, for example, to allow for some very sharp micromanagement, as you will see, for example, in Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2 or even Brood War, regarding, for example, unit targeting or the speed at which, for example, there are there are certain critical points upgrades, for example, that in StarCraft 2 are seen in which allow from some very sharp micro regarding, for example, interactions between Zerlings and Salads. For example, the Forge +1 upgrade to the Salads will increase and will allow Salads to do 2 attack kills for each Zerling that they face. So this kind of and players, for example, nowadays in 2018, we are seeing players go and micromanage their own Salads in order to sweep and do clean kills of the enemy Zerlings and do some very sharp micromanagement. This allows for some very like hype moments in esports. So you don't see like any of these, like any kind of going towards that area regarding exploiting niches of the population, of the player base.
Yeah, I would say you know, in the high end, or you know, the better the players get, and in the high end multiplayer matches, or the semi professional matches, obviously micromanagement gets more important because it gives you the little edge to you know, it's makes the little difference between victory and defeat. But it's not our goal to you know, we try to avoid our plan is not to add features that are specifically there to for micromanagement or to make the game more interesting for this high level or high end players. But the idea is more like, let's make a game that's the most amount of fun for
everyone.
as many people as possible, and then the really good players will find their ways to get a little edge. So and will find ways to really trick the system basically, and that's totally fine with us. And but it's not something we implement knowingly.
The thing is that going forward in this regarding the, for example, you had games such as Brood War that left some key kind of buggy interactions between the unit and allowed players, and because Blizzard simply left Brood War alone, they allowed players to express themselves with their own units via their own micromanagement of them. In this case, fantasy with Vulture micro and other qualities such as that. Are you planning to left some deep micro quality regarding your own units? And this is like a very deep question regarding, for example, the quality of design that you plan to leave your units with. For example, stacking, doing some crazy things like stacking your own squads in order to allow for a slightly higher DPS of them attacking enemy units.
Yeah, I would say at the moment my feeling about that is that because there are so many very different units in the game and so many abilities, that it's almost it would be impossible to not have something like that in the game, because
show up. Yeah,
it's just so complex and so much stuff going on that it's more a question of how many stuff is there by chance, and is it does it become unbalanced because of that? And if it becomes unbalanced, then we have to do something about it. But,
are you sure? Like, for example, in Brood War, there were many things that were imbalanced. For example, Mutalistic stacking, but the Protoss started exploiting their own things.
If it's really, if it's unbalanced in a way that one faction
becomes too frustrating to the enemy.
Right, and it's too superior, for example. If there are many things that are unbalanced, and in the end, all the unbalanced stuff balances itself again, then obviously that's fine. We have no problem with that. But as I said, I think with the complexity, it's almost inevitable that there will be ways for really good players to find their edge and to express themselves. I mean, in general, or the big point I want to make is when we did the survey, but even before that, obviously MOBAs are a big point when you talk to people about RTS, because there are people who basically think that MOBAs are like an evolution of RTS, and RTS is more like, that's the old games and the new games are MOBAs basically. And for us, MOBAs are a very different kind of game. And we don't think that it's a good idea to, when you want to make an RTS, to make the RTS too much like a MOBA, because people who like MOBAs and who like, the action aspect and the extreme micromanagement and the extreme optimization of very few units or of one unit and stuff like that, they are playing MOBAs. They probably do not play RTS anymore. And the people who love RTS games, they are probably not interested
in MOBAs
because otherwise they would play MOBAs.
Yeah, and there is also the entire backlash that happened, for example, with previous games such as Dawn of War 3, which had like...
Absolutely. And so we try to stay a little bit away from these, very MOBA-esque aspects of super micromanagement and stuff like that.
I see. So changing a little bit.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me talk for a second.
It's okay.
yeah, you just went into this flow, and I didn't have the chance to say. Yeah, I just want to wrap this up. The session, you guys can continue to talk, no problem. I would just first, before I leave, want to say thank you very much for Jan for really taking a lot of time to answer all of the questions, and you guys can stay and talk. And really, guys, if anyone is not yet going into the Kickstarter, please check this game. It sounds so awesome, and I can't wait to play it. I'm already in the Kickstarter, and yeah, you guys should check it out. Thank you very much, Jan. It was really interesting.
Yeah, was a pleasure, and I think I have to go to bed now as well because today is another very long day. But if you guys are interested, I would be more than happy to do this again, maybe when the Alpha 1 is out or something like that, and maybe we can discuss some of the questions left from this time next time.
Yeah, you can just yeah, we will talk and tell us when it's the best time for you guys, and we are here.
Yeah, cool.
So thank you very much. Derata, sorry for stopping you.
It's okay.
Yeah, and good night or good day or whatever the time is for you, and we will have other sessions.
Okay, thanks guys. Bye.